The pre-dawn light crawled across Joint Base Coronado like a whisper of secrets, painting the concrete and still landscape in muted grays and deep shadows. Most would overlook Maria Rodriguez's deliberate design perfected over years of survival. Her cleaning cart moved with practiced silence, each wheel carefully positioned to avoid the slightest squeak, each movement a calculated dance of invisibility. At 32, Maria carried the weight of worlds within her 5'4" frame. Her uniform standard tissue khaki, slightly faded, patches meticulously maintained blended perfectly with the background of the military installation. To the casual observer, she was unremarkable, an immigrant worker, another face in the endless rotation of civilian staff that kept the massive military machine running. But Maria was anything but ordinary. Her hands, seemingly soft from industrial-grade cleaning gloves, bore the subtlest of scars, tiny marks that told stories of survival cut from a razor wire fence in a conflict zone, a burn from an emergency radio repair, a nearly invisible line where a bullet had once grazed her skin. Each mark was a memory, carefully hidden beneath layers of professional composure. The barracks she cleaned wasn't just a building, it was a living, breathing organism of military precision. Navy SEALs moved through the space like panthers, muscular, alert, each muscle coiled with potential energy. They were the tip of America's military spear, and Maria knew every inch of their environment better than they realized. Her mop moved with a rhythm that was almost musical. But it wasn't just cleaning, it was mapping, memorizing, analyzing. Years of training, some official, most unofficial, had transformed Maria into a human surveillance system. Her eyes constantly scanned, her ears perpetually alert, the slight condensation on a window, the microscopic displacement of a chair, the barely perceptible dust pattern on a lock-reach detail told a story. Growing up in the borderlands between Colombia and Venezuela, Maria had learned survival was an art form. War wasn't just about weapons, it was about information, observation, understanding the silent language of spaces and people. Her father, a journalist who disappeared during the height of the regional conflicts, had taught her the most critical lesson: true power lies in being underestimated. The morning routine was choreographed perfection. 0 for 0 hours, the first SEAL teams would begin their pre-dawn training soon. Maria positioned herself strategically, her cleaning seemingly random, but each movement deliberate. She knew the rotation schedules, the training protocols, the subtle rhythms of this military ecosystem. A young SEAL, probably on his first serious deployment, glanced her way. Maria dropped her eyes immediately, the perfect picture of a diligent, unassuming worker. But in that split second, she had cataloged everything. His boot wear indicated recent jungle training. The slight tension in his shoulders suggested recent personal stress. The barely visible tattoo peeking from his sleeve hinted at a background more complex than his current assignment. Information was currency, and Maria was a billionaire in a world that thought she was broke. The cleaning chemicals she used were carefully selected, industrial grade, but with properties that could neutralize trace chemical signatures if needed. Her car wasn't just a cleaning station, it was a mobile command center, modified in ways no maintenance supervisor would ever detect. As the first rays of sunlight began to break through the high windows, Maria finished her sweep of the primary barracks. To anyone watching, she was completing another mundane shift, but beneath that facade, every sense was calibrated, every muscle memory primed. The Navy SEALs would train, the base would hum with its military precision, and Maria Rodriguez would continue to be exactly what everyone expected: invisible. But invisibility, she knew, was the most powerful visibility of all. Her fingers brushed against a locker, almost imperceptibly repositioning a small magnetic tracker. Not for any current mission, just a habit. Always prepared, always watching. Another day was beginning at Joint Base Coronado, and Maria Rodriguez was exactly where she needed to be. Staff Sergeant Jack Hawkins wasn't like other SEALs, where most saw the world in black and white. He understood the infinite shades of gray that existed between mission parameters and human reality. His eyes steel gray, with a depth that spoke of countless classified missions, had been tracking Maria Rodriguez for weeks. It wasn't her cleaning that caught his attention, it was everything else. The way she moved, the calculated precision of her seemingly random tasks, the almost imperceptible awareness that radiated from her like a silent alarm. Hawkins had spent 20 years in special operations, tracking ghosts in the most dangerous corners of the world. And Maria Rodriguez was a ghost he couldn't ignore. That morning, a critical training simulation was scheduled. Operation Nighthawk, complex exercise designed to test the team's ability to respond to a multi-layered urban infiltration scenario. The command had brought in advanced simulation equipment, a web of sensors, communication devices, and tactical modules that represented millions in military technology, but something was wrong. The first hint came during the initial equipment check. Minute discrepancies, microscopic interruptions in the signal integrity. Most would have dismissed it as standard technical noise, but Hawkins knew better. He watched Maria from the corner of his eye. She was cleaning a communications rack, her movements precise, almost surgical. Her hand lingered for a fraction of a second along on a specific junction box. Most would miss it, but Hawkins saw everything. "Hold up," he called to his team, his voice a low, controlled rumble that cut through the pre-mission tension. The other SEALs froze. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, no relation to Maria, looked up. His muscular frame coiled with anticipation. "What is it, Hawk?" Hawkins didn't respond immediately. Instead, he approached Maria, who was now methodically wiping down a set of communication modules. Her back was to him, but Hawkins knew she was aware of his approach. Every muscle in her body was subtly tensed. "Ready? You're not just cleaning," he said. It wasn't a question. Maria's response was immediate and calculated. She turned, her eyes meeting his with a calm that would unsettle most men. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." But Hawkins saw beyond the words, the slight micro-expression, the nearly imperceptible shift in her breathing. She was reading him as carefully as he was reading her. The simulation was set to begin in 17 minutes. In the background, the other SEALs were checking weapons, running final diagnostics. The room hummed with testosterone-fueled energy and military precision, but something was brewing, something that existed in the space between professional protocol and pure instinct. Hawkins knew Maria had modified the communication modules, not to sabotage, but to test, to probe, to understand. "How long have you been watching our systems?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. A ghost of a smile played across Maria's lips. "Longer than you've been watching me, Sergeant." The challenge was clear, an invitation, a provocation. The room suddenly felt charged. The other SEALs began to notice the interaction. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez took a step forward, his hand unconsciously moving closer to his sidearm. But Hawkins raised a hand, a silent command that stopped everything. In that moment, the entire dynamics of the base shifted. Maria wasn't just a maintenance worker, and Hawkins wasn't just another SEAL team leader. They were two highly trained professionals engaged in a silent conversation that transcended their apparent roles. The simulation equipment continued its pre-programmed startup sequence. Lights blinked, sensors hummed, but something fundamental had changed. Hawkins made a decision that would alter everything. "You're coming with us," he said to Maria. Not a request, not an order, a statement of inevitability. The other SEALs exchanged looks of confusion. Maria's eyes narrowed slightly, a mix of calculation and something else. Anticipation, excitement. Outside, the San Diego morning continued. Waves crashed against the distant shore. Military helicopters cut through the sky. Another day at Joint Base Coronado, but nothing would be the same again. The simulation room transformed into a pressure cooker of tension. Hawkins' decision hung in the air like electricity before a storm. The other SEALs, men who had faced down terrorists, navigated impossible missions, survived scenarios that would break most humans, now stared in collective disbelief. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez spoke first. "Sir, with all due respect, stow it." Hawkins cut him off, his voice a blade of pure authority. Maria stood perfectly still, not defensive, not nervous, simply present. Her entire body was a coiled mechanism of potential energy, ready to respond to whatever challenge was coming. Hawkins reached for his primary rifle, a customized MK-18 CQBR, modified for close-quarters combat. Each SEAL's weapon was more than equipment. It was an extension of themselves, precision-tuned, personalized, a lifeline in the most dangerous moments. The room went silent. He extended the rifle to Maria, not handed, not offered, presented, a challenge, a test. Her hands moved before anyone could process the action, no hesitation, no fumbling. The rifle seemed to flow from Hawkins' grip to hers as if it had always belonged there. Her grip was perfect, stance immediate, The weapon became an extension of her body in a way that defied explanation. The other SEALs froze. Mike Rodriguez's hand unconsciously moved to his own weapon. Not a threat, a reflex. Something was happening that violated every protocol, every expectation. Hawkins stepped back, completely, entirely, leaving Maria at the center of the simulation space. "Run it," he said simply. The simulation room was a marvel of military technology. Holographic projections could transform the space into any environment. Urban warfare zones, mountain terrain, jungle landscapes. Today, it would become a complex urban infiltration scenario. Lights dimmed, projectors hummed to life. Suddenly, they were in a war-torn cityscape. Destroyed buildings, potential threats in every shadow. The kind of environment where a single wrong move meant death. Maria didn't move like someone unfamiliar with a weapon. She moved like someone who had survived 100 such scenarios. Her footwork was surgical, precise, each step calculated. The rifle became more than a tool, it was a part of her nervous system. The holographic threats began to appear, simulated hostiles, complex engagement scenarios. Most would have hesitated. Maria did not. Her first 3 targets were neutralized before the other SEALs could even process the threat. Vectors, not just eliminated, strategically neutralized with a precision that suggested intimate knowledge of tactical engagement. Hawkins watched. His face betrayed nothing, but his eyes, they were taking in every single detail. The simulation grew more complex. Multiple threat vectors, civilian populations, potential collateral damage scenarios that would challenge even the most seasoned operators. Maria navigated it like she had written the playbook. When the simulation ended, the room was silent. The other SEALs looked like they had just witnessed something impossible. Mike Rodriguez's mouth was slightly open, a mixture of shock and something else. Respect. Perhaps. Hawkins stepped forward. "Interesting," he said. "Just that. One word that carried a universe of implications." Maria simply returned the rifle. Her movements were fluid, control, as if she had just completed the most routine task in the world. "Shall I continue cleaning?" she asked. No emotion, no triumph, just a simple question. The challenge had been issued, the gauntlet thrown down, and nothing would be the same again. The memories came like ghosts, fractured, brutal, unforgiving. Ciudad Bolivar, 2008, a landscape carved by conflict, where survival was a daily negotiation between hope and desperation. Maria wasn't Maria then. She was Eleanor Restrepo, the daughter of a journalist who dared to speak truth in a world that murdered inconvenient narratives. Her father's desk was a war zone of its own. Photographs, encrypted notes, fragments of stories that powerful people wanted buried. Rodrigo Restrepo wasn't just a journalist. He was an architect of truth, building narratives from the rubble of political violence. The night they came for him, Maria learned her first lesson about survival. Her mother, a former military nurse with connections that spanned both legal and underground networks, had prepared her, not with love, not with comfort, but with brutal, practical training. "Listen carefully," her mother would say, cleaning a disassembled weapon with the same care other women might use to braid a daughter's hair. "The world will not protect you. You must become your own protection." By 12, Maria could field strip a rifle blindfolded. By 15, she understood more about geopolitical intelligence than most graduate students. Her education wasn't in classrooms, it was in survival. The paramilitaries, the guerrilla networks, the drug cartels, the corrupt military units. They were all pieces of a complex chess game where civilians were nothing more than disposable pawns. Her father's last investigation had uncovered something massive, something that connected international arms dealers, political assassination networks, and deep state operations that crossed multiple national boundaries. They took him on a Tuesday. No warning, no trace. Her mother disappeared 2 weeks later, leaving Maria with nothing but an encrypted hard drive, a set of instructions, and a network of contacts that existed in the shadows. Between official narratives, the next 5 years were a masterclass in reinvention. Maria learned languages like other people learned songs. She studied communication systems, intelligence gathering, tactical survival, not as a hobby, as a means of staying alive, of finding the truth about her parents. Her network was global, but invisible. Humanitarian workers, retired intelligence operatives, journalists who had survived where others had been silenced, They became her family, her mission. The hard drive her mother left was more than data. It was a roadmap, a complex puzzle that connected dots across continents, arms deals, political manipulations, the kind of information that could topple governments. By 25, she had dismantled 3 international trafficking networks, exposed corruption that reached into the highest levels of 3 governments, all without ever appearing on an official radar. The maintenance worker job at Joint Base Coronado wasn't a job. It was a carefully constructed cover, a way to get close, to continue the investigation her parents had started. Jack Hawkins wasn't just seeing her in that simulation room. He was witnessing the product of a lifetime of survival, of calculated revenge, of a mission that was bigger than any single military operation. Her father's last words echoed in her mind, words spoken the night before his disappearance. The truth is a weapon, Elena, and the most dangerous weapon is the one nobody sees coming. The next 48 hours would redefine everything. After the simulation, Hawkins initiated a protocol that existed in the gray spaces between official channels. No paperwork, no formal briefings, just a series of calculated moves that would test Maria's true capabilities. The base transformed into a living, breathing challenge. Hawkins assembled a team that represented the absolute pinnacle of special operations expertise. Not just SEALs, a composite unit of individuals who had survived the impossible. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, Lieutenant Karen Chen, a cyber intelligence specialist with connections that stretched across 3 continents. Master Chief David Williamson, whose tactical planning had become legendary in special operations circles. They didn't know Maria, but they would. The first test came unexpectedly. A simulated communication breach. Most would have seen a standard cybersecurity exercise. Maria saw it for what it was, a carefully constructed probe designed to reveal her true capabilities. The communication systems began to destabilize. Encrypted channels flickered. Backup systems showed microscopic vulnerabilities. To an untrained eye, it would look like a standard technical malfunction. Maria's fingers moved across the communication modules with a precision that defied explanation. She wasn't just responding to the breach, she was dancing with it, anticipating, redirecting, transforming the attack into a complex information gathering opportunity. Hawkins watched from a secondary monitoring station. His team exchanged glances. Something extraordinary was happening. Lieutenant Chen, arguably the most technically sophisticated member of the team, leaned forward. "That's not standard defensive protocol," she muttered. Her fingers danced across her own systems, trying to track Maria's movements, but Maria was several steps ahead. The communication breach transformed. What had started as a potential security risk became a carefully orchestrated information extraction operation. Fragments of data seemingly random began to assemble into a complex mosaic of intelligence that no single agency could have predicted. Williamson, the tactical planning expert, recognized the pattern first. "She's not just defending," he said quietly, "she's hunting." The next phase of the test came physical. A close-quarters combat scenario designed to push human limits. The training room became a controlled chaos of potential threat vectors, multiple attackers, complex environmental challenges, the kind of scenario that would break most special operations personnel. Maria moved like liquid mercury, no wasted motion, no unnecessary energy. Each movement was a calculated response that seemed to predict threats before they fully materialized. 3 elite operators approached simultaneously. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, a test designed to overwhelm even the most sophisticated combatant. She neutralized them before they could complete their first coordinated strike, not through brute force, through an almost supernatural understanding of human movement, of tactical positioning, of the invisible lines of potential energy that existed between combatants. Hawkins didn't react, didn't move, simply observed. The team's collective heartbeat seemed to pause. This wasn't just skill, this was something else entirely. As the final simulated threat was neutralized, Maria stood exactly where she had started. No heavy breathing, no sign of exertion, as if she had just completed the most routine task in the world. "Shall I return to my cleaning duties?" she asked. The question hung in the air, part challenge, part genuine inquiry. Hawkins stepped forward. The room held its collective breath. "No," he said simply, "we're just getting started." The base continued its rhythmic pulse. Helicopters circled overhead. Another day at Joint Base Coronado. But nothing would ever be the same again. The line between maintenance worker and extraordinary operative had been definitively, irrevocably erased. A complex game had begun, and Maria Rodriguez was about to show them that she had been writing the rules all along. The underground command center was a cathedral of classified information. Concrete walls lined with advanced encryption systems. Holographic displays that could reconstruct entire geopolitical landscapes with a simple gesture. This was where secrets came to be dissected. Hawkins brought in a team of specialists, not just military, a hybrid unit that bridged multiple intelligence agencies, NSA cryptographers, CIA field analysts, DIA strategic planners. Each carried a piece of Maria's puzzle. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a renowned intelligence historian, spread out a series of documents that seemed to materialize from thin air. Classified files, intercepted communications, fragments of investigations that had been buried deeper than most would believe possible. We've been tracking fragments of her operational history. For years, Vasquez began, her voice clinical, detached, but nothing ever connected. The holographic display came to life, images, locations, timestamps, a complex web that seemed to defy logical connection, a humanitarian mission in Sudan, an environmental research project in the Amazon, a medical supply chain investigation in Southeast Asia. On the surface, unrelated. But the team saw the invisible threads. Maria Rodriguez wasn't just a maintenance worker. She wasn't even just an operative. She was a ghost that had been systematically dismantling international networks for years. Lieutenant Karen Chen, the cyber intelligence specialist, pulled up a series of digital footprints. These communication patterns, she said, her fingers dancing across multiple screens. They're unlike anything I've ever seen. It's like she's been deliberately leaving breadcrumbs, but only for those who know exactly how to look. Hawkins remained silent, watching, absorbing. The most classified file emerged last. A document so sensitive that its mere existence could trigger international incidents, stamped with clearance levels that most in the room had never witnessed. It concerned her parents, Rodrigo and Clara Restrepo, not just journalists, not just activists. They had been the tip of an intelligence spear that had been fighting a war most of the world didn't even know existed. International arms trafficking, Dr. Vasquez explained. But not just weapons, information, networks, the kind of global infrastructure that allows conflicts to perpetuate. The pieces began to align. Maria's entire existence was a carefully constructed mission, every job, every location, every seemingly random interaction. A deep cover operative who had transcended traditional intelligence methodologies. She's been hunting something. Hawkins finally spoke. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Something specific, personal. The files revealed a network that stretched across continents. Political assassinations, weapons systems that could destabilize entire regions, communication channels that existed in the shadows between official narratives. Her parents hadn't just been killed. They had been strategically eliminated to prevent them from exposing a network so complex, so deeply embedded, that its exposure would trigger global repercussions. And Maria had been systematically, meticulously dismantling it, piece by piece, network by network. How many? Mike Rodriguez asked quietly. Chen's fingers flew across the screens. 17 confirmed international trafficking networks. 32. Political corruption investigations effectively shut down. 0 direct attributions to her. The room went silent. This wasn't just an operative. This was a one-person intelligence revolution. Hawkins understood something fundamental in that moment. Maria wasn't working for any single agency. She was working for something far more important. Justice. Personal. Uncompromising. Absolute. She knows we're close, he said suddenly. Not a question. A statement. The classified files continued to spin in their holographic dance. Locations. Connections. A web of global intrigue that most would never comprehend. Maria Rodriguez had been preparing for this moment her entire life, and they were about to find out exactly what that meant. The hunt was no longer theoretical. It was becoming real. Time became a weapon. Maria knew they were close. The classified files, the intricate investigation, the subtle probing she had detected in the basis systems. Everything was converging to a single point, a moment she had both anticipated and dreaded for years. Her safe house was nothing like what intelligence operatives typically maintained. A small apartment in a nondescript San Diego neighborhood, carefully curated, meticulously prepared. Each item a potential tool, each space a potential escape route. She began to move, not with panic, not with fear, with the calculated precision of someone who had planned for this moment her entire life. The encrypted drive her mother had given her years ago, the one she had carried through countless countries, through multiple identities, would now serve its ultimate purpose. Decades of collected intelligence, connections, proof of a network so vast it could topple governments. Hawkins wasn't just investigating her. He was an opportunity. The SEAL team represented something she had never had before: resources, direct, operational capability, a chance to complete the mission that had consumed her entire life. Her phone, a custom-built device that would make most cybersecurity experts weep, began to compile data, communication patterns, troop movements, financial transactions that existed in the microscopic spaces between official records. The network her parents had discovered was preparing to make a move, a weapons sale, political destabilization in 3 separate continents, the kind of operation that would create chaos on a global scale. And Maria was the only one who knew exactly how to stop it. Hawkins entered her carefully constructed narrative exactly as she had anticipated, not through the front door, not through official channels, but through the complex web of relationships and connections she had strategically placed over years. "We need to talk," he said, standing in her living room. No weapon drawn, no aggressive posture, just pure, concentrated intention. Maria didn't turn immediately. Her back remained to him. A calculated choice, showing vulnerability, showing trust. "You've figured out more than most," she responded. Not a question, a statement. The next 30 minutes would be a delicate dance, information exchange, strategic positioning, to highly trained operatives understanding that they needed each other more than either wanted to admit. She turned. Hawkins saw something he hadn't expected. Not just operative, not just a survivor, but someone who had transformed personal tragedy into a global mission of surgical precision. "The network moves in 72 hours, Maria said. Her voice carried the weight of years of preparation. Hawkins understood immediately. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. This was an intervention that could reshape global power structures. The weapons system they were tracking wasn't just about arms. It was about control, about creating conflict zones that served specific geopolitical interests, the kind of operation that existed in the shadows between official narratives. Maria began to lay out her evidence: encrypted files, communication intercepts, financial trails that would make forensic accountants weep with their complexity. "My parents died uncovering the first layer," she said. "I've been dismantling it piece by piece ever since." Hawkins recognized something profound in that moment. Maria wasn't seeking revenge. She was seeking justice, a critical, almost philosophical difference. The SEAL team would become her instrument, not controllers, partners. "We'll need a plan," Hawkins said. A ghost of a smile crossed Maria's face. "I've had a plan for 20 years. Outside, San Diego continued its rhythmic pulse. Military helicopters cut through the sky. Waves crashed against distant shores. But inside this small apartment, the most critical operation of the decade was about to begin. The hunt was no longer theoretical. It was becoming real, and Maria Rodriguez was finally ready to finish what her parents had started. The operation had no official name, no official sanction. It existed in the razor-thin space between international law and absolute necessity. 72 hours of preparation compressed into a single, explosive moment. They chose a location that seemed impossible: a shipping hub in the southern Philippines, neutral ground, complex terrain, multiple exit strategies, the kind of environment where most operations would collapse under their own complexity. Maria and the SEAL team were not most operations. Hawkins had assembled a unit that represented the absolute pinnacle of special operations. Expertise, not just muscle, not just tactical brilliance, but a team that understood the complexity of their mission. Went far beyond traditional military engagement. The target was more than a weapons transaction. It was a nexus point, a critical junction where multiple international networks converged. Arms dealers, political fixers, the kind of operators who existed between shadows and official narratives. Maria's preparation was surgical. Years of intelligence gathering had led to this moment. Every communication intercept, every financial trail, every microscopic detail her parents had begun investigating decades ago had all converged here. The initial approach was deliberate, controlled chaos. Lieutenant Karen Chen manipulated communication systems with a precision that made traditional cyber warfare look like child's play. Financial transactions began to collapse. Communication channels started to fragment. The target network found itself bleeding information. Before they even realized they were under attack, Sergeant Mike Rodriguez handled the ground tactical positioning. His team moved like liquid mercury, adaptive, responsive, each member understanding their role with a telepathic precision. But Maria was the true weapon. Her understanding of the network was molecular. She didn't just know their communication patterns. She understood their psychological infrastructure, how they thought, how they responded, the invisible threads that connected their operations. The first phase of the operation was information warfare, not destruction. Deconstruction, critical. Communication nodes went dark. Financial routes became labyrinths. The network found itself bleeding from 1,000 microscopic wounds before it even realized it was under attack. Then came the physical intervention. Hawkins led the tactical team, but Maria was the strategic architect. They moved through the shipping complex like ghosts. Not a single unnecessary movement. Not a single wasted breath. The kind of operational precision that would become legendary in intelligence circles. 3 primary targets, 17 secondary operatives, a network that had existed for decades. Neutralized in less than 27 minutes. No casualties. Minimal physical destruction. But a complete systemic collapse. The final confrontation wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Maria faced the primary target, a political fixer, who had been instrumental in her parents' elimination decades ago. No anger, no revenge, just a clinical, surgical intervention. It ends here, she said, not a threat, a statement of absolute fact. When it was over, the international intelligence community would spend months trying to understand what had happened, how an entire global network had been systematically dismantled with such precision. Hawkins watched Maria in the aftermath, not with admiration, not with hero worship, but with a profound understanding of what true operational excellence looked like. Your parents would be proud, he said simply. Maria's response was typically measured. They would have appreciated the methodology. The mission wasn't just about personal revenge. It was about closing the chapter of global manipulation, about ensuring that the kind of network that had destroyed her family could never rise again. As they prepared to extract, the shipping complex looked untouched. No dramatic explosions. No Hollywood-style destruction. Just the silent, complete collapse of a global operation. Maria Rodriguez, once a maintenance worker, now revealed as something far more extraordinary, had completed her life's mission. The sun rose over the Philippine shipping hub. Another day began, but the world had fundamentally changed, and nobody would ever know exactly how.